Before we go any further, if you value serious military history and real survival knowledge drawn from the past, subscribe to the channel right now and leave a comment as you listen. It helps keep this kind of long-form, research-driven content alive, and it tells me you want more deep dives like this one. Water was not a background concern in World War II. It was a daily, sometimes hourly, fight for survival. Entire units stalled, retreated, or collapsed not because of enemy fire, but because thirst destroyed discipline, judgment, and physical strength. Today, we're going to examine how soldiers across different theatres of war found drinkable water when maps were wrong, supply lines failed, and every visible source might be poisoned or deadly. This is not a romantic story. It is a practical historical study of ingenuity under pressure, and there are lessons here that still apply to modern survival scenarios. Why water became one of the most dangerous resources of the war. From North Africa to the Pacific Islands, water scarcity shaped military operations more than many people realize. A soldier could survive days without food, but only hours without water under extreme conditions. Heat, heavy equipment, constant movement and stress accelerated dehydration. German units in the deserts of Libya recorded losses from heat exhaustion before they ever encountered British armour. Japanese soldiers on Pacific Islands often died of thirst within sight of freshwater streams that were contaminated by decay, bacteria, or enemy control. Commanders understood this, which is why water discipline was enforced as strictly as ammunition control. For modern survivalists, this historical reality reinforces a critical lesson. The presence of water does not mean the presence of safe water. World War II soldiers learned this the hard way, and the methods they developed were born from necessity, not theory. One of the most valuable skills taught informally during the war was environmental observation. Soldiers were trained by experience to read terrain for subtle signs of water. In arid regions, vegetation told the truth long before maps did. Thicker grass, greener patches, and certain types of trees often indicated shallow groundwater. Australian and British troops in North Africa learned to dig shallow test holes in dry riverbeds called wadis. Even when the surface was bone dry, water often pooled beneath layers of sand and gravel. The practical application here is straightforward. In a survival situation, dry riverbeds are not dead terrain. Digging down 1 to 3 feet in the lowest point can reveal water filtered naturally through sand. WWII soldiers used helmets, bayonets, and entrenching tools to do this. Today, a sturdy container or multi-tool can serve the same purpose. In environments where no flowing water existed, soldiers relied on atmospheric moisture. This was common in desert and island warfare. German Afrika Korps troops were trained to collect morning dew using cloth socks or bandages spread over vegetation or metal surfaces overnight. At dawn, the moisture was wrung out into containers. The yield was small, but it kept men alive. In the Pacific, U.S. Marines sometimes used ponchos to trap condensation. By stretching a poncho over a shallow pit and placing a container beneath the lowest point, they created a crude solar still. Heat caused moisture from the ground to evaporate and condense on the underside of the fabric, dripping into the container below. For modern use, this method remains valid. Solar stills work slowly, but they require no fire, no chemicals, and minimal tools. World War II proved that even a cup of water per day could mean the difference between survival and collapse. How military units dealt with contaminated and enemy-controlled water. Water sources were often deliberately sabotaged. Retreating forces poisoned wells with fuel, chemicals, or corpses. Soldiers were taught never to trust obvious water sources without testing or treatment. Boiling was the most reliable method, but fuel shortages made it impractical at times. Chemical purification tablets became standard issue late in the war, though many soldiers disliked the taste and skipped doses, sometimes with fatal consequences. In emergency situations, soldiers filtered water through cloth, sand and charcoal from burned wood before boiling. This layered filtration reduced sediment and some pathogens. The lesson here is clear. Filtration alone is not purification, but it is a critical first step. Soldiers used what they had, and the same principle applies today. A shirt, gravel and charcoal can significantly improve water safety before boiling or chemical treatment. How rainwater harvesting became an overlooked survival strategy. Rain was treated as an opportunity, not an inconvenience. Helmets, tarps, ponchos and even foxholes were used to collect rainfall. On Pacific Islands, Marines learned to angle their shelters to funnel rain into canteens. This water was generally safer than ground sources, though still boiled when possible. This method is easily transferable to modern survival situations. Any non-porous surface can become a catchment system. WWII soldiers demonstrated that preparation is often mental rather than material. Being ready to collect water when it appears is just as important as knowing where to find it. How discipline and rationing preserved water under extreme pressure. Finding water was only half the battle. Conserving it was equally important. Soldiers were trained to rinse mouths rather than swallow, to avoid unnecessary exertion during peak heat, and to march at night when possible. Water discipline prevented panic and reduced consumption. Leaders enforced strict ration schedules, sometimes issuing water by the mouthful. This historical reality carries a sobering lesson. Survival is not about comfort. It is about control. Modern survivalists can learn from this mindset by planning intake carefully and, avoiding waste, even when water seems available. Why these World War II lessons still matter today. The ingenuity of World War II soldiers was not based on advanced technology. It was based on observation, adaptation, and discipline. They used the land, the air, and their limited equipment to stay alive under conditions that honestly stripped away modern conveniences. These methods remain relevant because they rely on principles, not gadgets. If you ever find yourself without clean water, remember that history has already solved many of these problems. Dig where water once flowed. Collect moisture from the air. Treat every source with suspicion. Conserve relentlessly. If this deep dive added real value to your understanding of wartime survival, subscribe to the channel, share this video with fellow history enthusiasts, and leave a comment with your thoughts or questions. That's how we keep serious historical knowledge alive and evolving.